We back. The book right here is the Smithsonian's Contributions to Knowledge, the Ancient Minings as the Shores of Lake Superior by Charles, it looks like it says Whitless. You know what I'm saying? It's an alright book, you know what I'm saying? I haven't made it that far into it. It's only 50 some pages. It looks like it just jumped. You have the Waterbury mines, we got the wooden shovels, the section of the Copper Falls vines, the stone hammer, uh, or maul, which one grove broken by use, copper spearheads, central mines, section of vein or old pits, broken maul without grove, ancient pits of the boulder drifts or gravel, Minnesota mines, section of vines looking from the earliest quarters, stone maul with the double groves in Minnesota. We got a couple good chapters we gonna get into it. But let's get into it. It says the evidence of the ancient mining operations within the mineral region of Lake Superior were first brought to the public notice in the winter of 1847 and 8. Although the Jesuit fathers frequently mentioned the existence of copper and even used the term mines, it is clear that the general tenor of their narratives that they neither saw nor knew of any actual mining in the technical sense of the word. They announced as early as 1636 the presence of native copper and referred to it as having been taken from the mines. This is prior to the time when they had themselves visited the Great Lakes and their information was derived from Indians. At the time, they speak with equal certainty of the mines of gold, rubies, and steel, but it must be borne in remembrance that the French word is not equivalent to the English mines, but many be more correctly rendered veins or deposits of metal or ores. In the relations of 1659 and 60, after the missions had been established on Lake Superior, the regions is reported to be enriched in all of the borders by the mines and lead, almost pure of copper, all refined in pieces as large as the first, a great rock which has whole veins of turquoise. It is probable that the accounts are second hand, such as the Chippewa gave when they uh, exhibited to their fathers specimens of the native metal in the shape of water-worn pieces of small boulder, uh, brochured in the historic Vertable and Company in 1640 attests that there are in this region mines of copper, tin, antimony, and lead. I wonder what antimony is. We have to look that up. He speaks of great islands 50 leagues in circumference, which is doubtless that one now called uh, Michicopit, where there is a very beautiful mine of copper. Copper was also found in other places in large masses, all refined. In one instance, ingot of copper was discovered which weighed more than 800 pounds. So motherfucker found a big ass copper rock, 800 pounds, man. My boy. You got to call the homies. They got to get a truck. They got to get some horses. But it's most likely you gonna get this from somewhere you got to lug it away from the motherfucking the waterfront or the, because you know most of the time when you mine, like if you watch the mining shows, they got to go to a hillside and blast the side of the hill with water to remove the grass and the soil till they can see it, and then they start catching the runoff and then they shake it out the pan. So how you just run up on an 800-pound copper rock, and then you like talk to people like when they have like these crystal shops or they're mining nowadays. I ask them all the time on their sites and stuff. How do you think that affects the earth when you snatch out that much of its natural composition and take it with you? As if that's, you know, if that, it's like you're fucking up the whole, the, how would you say it, the geoelectricity, the waves of the earth. You fucking it up, man. You gotta chill out with all this mining. People really gotta chill out with it because you're gonna kill the earth. You're basically digging in the side of mama. But some of these motherfuckers are born parasites and they gonna die parasites. They'll never get over the idea of what you want to call that shit where I forget capitalism. They'll never get over capitalism. It's a fucking disease. You know. Of course, money is important in the system. So yes, provide for your family, but capitalism, don't let it drive you. Don't let it have you making decisions like, oh well, I could have got rich, so I should have did that. No, like if it's a dirty move or it's a move with no integrity or no honor, and you shouldn't be trying to stand on no shit like that. But let's get back to what we're talking about. 800 pounds, and from which the Indians cut off the pieces which their axes, after having softened it by fire. All of the information brochures obtained from the French traders and not from his own observations. Such is the tenor of historical accounts from the time of Lagarde in 1636 to Chevrolet. If you ever notice that when you up there in Michigan, man, all the car companies is named after motherfuckers, who was explorers and shit. You'll get up there, motherfucker named Cadillac. If you didn't know Cadillac was an explorer, niggas riding around in Cadillacs. You got the motherfucking, you got my niggas up there in the D and all in the Midwest. They all got the Cartiers on. They all buffed up. So you got Jacques Cartier. You got they just like they can't get away from it. It's just way too much going on. Alright, you got the Chevrolet. You know what I'm saying? Let's get back on task. Little stupid tidbits. Shit I've noticed. Chevrolet in 1721, detached with the water-worn lumps of copper that has been found in great numbers in the gravel, clay, and loose materials over the rocks from the days of the Catholic fathers to this time. Not only is the mineral region, but over a large space to the southward of it. All of these pieces were originally from the veins, but have probably been separated by the same cause that gave rise to the formation, which geologists call the drift. And we're gonna get into the drift. Y'all know we did that in Ignatius O'Donnelly, Dirt. Still one of the greatest books ever. You know what I'm saying? I thought it was pretty well put together. Yeah, get that man his motherfucking, give him his flowers and his crown, because he ain't here no more, but he still need this respect. The agent, whatever it was, that broke off fragments from the rock, not only on Lake Superior, but the further north, they transported them to the shape of a boulder, sand, and gravel as far south as the Valley of Ohio, also bore along the contents of the mineral veins which the rocks contain. Pieces of the native copper are well calculated to resist the serve adoration to which the transported materials are subjected. Masses of it have been found not far removed from the mineral range, weighing 3,000 pounds. So they done jumped up from 800 to 3,000 pounds worth of motherfucking minerals snatched. Alright, man. And other greater distances have been taken from the bed of the river. From the beach and lake weigh 1,500 pounds and 800 pounds. Others again of the less size have been recorded from the gravel of the Menemez River near the shores of the Green Bay and the Sheboygan Falls near the town of Sheboygan of Lake Michigan. Professor J. Bernard of Cleveland has a piece weighing 5 or 6 pounds, which was found 5 feet beneath the surface in the dirt gravel of the Rocky River, Medina County, Ohio. Had the Indians and the French or the Jesuits of the early times discovered copper on the shores of Lake Michigan or Lake Erie, not knowing or supposing to the metal could exist except in mines, that they would probably have spoken of it having been found in a mine. The attention of the fathers were not particularly called to the subject of mineralogy, and although they were learned men, their knowledge of geology must have been very limited, for the sciences had not at the time assumed a place in the schools. As to the accounts given by savages, early ones have had much intercourse, which they know the great allowances must be made for their want of knowledge and their tendency of embellishments and exaggerations. I have listed too many wonderful tales concerning distant mineral riches an aged Chippewa by the name of Kadikin, uh, whom I met on the Ontonagon. Okay, so the Ontonagon in 1845 stated as he was one day sailing along the western shores of Quebec and Akabee Lake at the head of the west branch of the river, he heard an explosion on the face of the rock cliff and overlooked the water and saw pieces of something falling at the distance from him, both in the lake and on the beach, which he had found some of them proved to be white metal like shuina or money. Excuse me. It says 17 years residing in Michigan. Shadowy though it be, the jumper who made the next morning with two Indians a a carbage started on our return trip. I have left my Indian friends with no feelings of regret, though in justice to host the hostess and companions of the wigwam will say to did all their powers to make me comfortable, but the pot of corn from which we had all satisfied hunger was merely empty. The deer the little hunters had brought in about gone, with no strength and no prospects of regaining in among these poor redskins. No happier man ever set out on a journey with a fair prospect, as soon reaching home providing the skins and bones upon which I built all my hopes kept together long enough to haul me 30 miles. The first 15 were maybe in less time than I had anticipated. The Indians informed me that I was a wigwam just over the banks of the river, where we could sometime get something to eat. This was cheering news, and the halt was made. We found a new natured squaw who was being told by my guide that I would give her big shana or money. Okay, so it's just a word for shana. Okay. Which the white man gives to the Indians of Lake Point. There are good reasons why the old missionaries should have had greater confidence in such stories that we have, and thus have given them a place in their reports to the propaganda. But with all the influences possessed by them over the Indians and the closeness of their ties, that could not fail to exist between a priest and his coverts, not instance is referred to, could not fail to exist between a priest and coverts, not instance to refer what the fuck, where they shown mining operations upon the rock or veins. There is nothing to show that the Indians rock copper in a mine at the time. They had no implements proper for their purpose, nor did they produce uh, samples of the metal taken from the position of the situ. The Indians had neither copper kettles nor axes when the French came among them, but only rudely fashioned copper knives that were evidently beaten out of the small boulders instead of viewing copper as an object of everyday use. They regarded it as a sacred mantiu and carefully preserved pieces of it wrapped up in skins in their lodge for many years, and this custom had been continued till modern times. I am well aware that they have a superstitious dread of showing a mineral mass or locality to the white man, believing that the Mantiu will visit them with some calamity if they do so. The missionaries, however, frequently overcame the feeling of regard to copper boulders and could as easily have done so in regard to the mines, and any such had really existed if the Chippewa had been cognizant, my bad, had been cognizant of the ancient works. That's my first time seeing that word written out. If a motherfucker put me on the spelling bee spot and was like, spell cognizant, I would have. But then I suck at spelling anyway. But shit, let's get back into it. I got that good enough diploma, like I tell y'all, GED. Still smarter than you. Let's get back to it. Boom, 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 boom. Let's find it. I didn't fuck around, lost my spot, y'all. Yeah, fucking around. Now, cognizant of the ancient works that have been recently discovered, they would have been communicated to this fact in their spiritual fathers who had not have suffered such instances, a fact to be lost if the Indians possessed traditions from their ancestors relating to ancient mines or the people who worked them. Those must also have come to the ears of the Jesuits, with the exception of the old Chippewa chief, which resided some years since the Fond du Lac, Lake Superior. I never knew it was called that. I have known of no one pretending to such knowledge. This story he gives is sufficiently imaginative and relates to the mines wrought by his tribe on the Isles of Royale in times long past when the fathers were much happier and had larger canoes than his contemporaries have now. I place his narrative in the same category with those above noticed as having reference to boulder copper and not to that obtained from mining in situ. From evidence which I shall give in describing the work in detail, it will appear that they were abandoned several hundred years before the French became acquainted with the northern tribes. No mines have been found that could have been wrought as late as, why did they say worked, as late as the earliest Jesuits, and such were wrought by the Indians. It must have been at a period very remote, such as the loon's foot described. But could the natives have lost the recollection of such state of things had they ever worked mines? They must have possessed the skills to fashion the metal extracted from them into various useful forms, without which they would not would be of no value. Neither the skill nor the implements themselves would have been lost in a few hundred years by a people having the same wants and residing in the same country. It is also seems to be highly improbable that their ancestors either knew of ancient mines not worked by themselves or the people who wrought them. Tradition is the only history of savage nations, and the fault of these species, uh, this species of knowledge, is not in the absence, but in the excess of material such as they are. Among thousands of leaves which the Indians had related, nothing positive or consistent has come to knowledge of respecting the people who preceded the present Aborigines, except a tradition. So he says, let's go back one more time. Among thousands of legends which the Indians have related, nothing positive or consistent has come to my knowledge respecting the people who preceded the present Aborigines, except a tradition communicated to Major Long in 1819 upon the great Miami River by the Indian chiefs during his expeditions of the source of the Mississippi. Aside from this, I have heard of nothing coming from the western tribes concerning the origins of the tumuli and the earthworks that are conspicuous in the Ohio, Kentucky, and the West and other western states as a people, if we may judge by their silence on the subjects of which they may be supposed inclined to be communicated. If they had anything to tell, the Aborigines have no traditionary knowledge of their predecessors, the race of the mound builders. Neither do we find in the records of the English travelers who succeeded the French in 1763 any notice of ancient mines. Descriptions of the locality of the remains of the ancient mining occupations and company. In casting the eyes over the map of Lake Superior, there's a remarkable projection in the form of an immense horn, which is observed jutting out from the south shore and carving to the northeast. They're talking about that little tip on Michigan that ain't really connected to it. When you get all the way up there, like going like you can like go to Wisconsin or some shit. You keep riding around up there. But I personally, I wouldn't go if it ain't summertime. Boy, you going into fucking Canada. Like Michigan is Canada. Let's just put it like that. It's cold in Ohio, but it gets so cold in the D. And then you gonna go past that? I don't understand. It ain't for me. Alright, let's get back to it. Alright, the peninsula, which is called Kennewa Point, is about 80 miles in length, and well, I always thought it was bigger than that. It's a place where it joins the mainland 45 miles in width through the whole extent of the projection. A belt of meadowlarous trap formation extends, differing a various point in structure and the character of its content along this belt, which is designated as a map by dotted lines, which are exhibited throughout nearly its whole extent. A disturbance of the strata and the upheaval of compromising a series of bluffs rising abruptly from the two streams, Eagle and Montreal River. Within the belts, all of the mining operations of ancient and modern have been chiefly confined. The mostly remarkable features of the district is in the characters of the metalliferous. I am not. Well, I'm gonna have to find out how to say that. Products which occur not in the conditions of an ore of copper and exclusive as native metal. This is met with the immense masses in the veins of smaller size and in rounded nodules. The cutting of the masses is a tedious and costly process, and some instances, even within all of the appliances of modern art, requires several months before a single mass is extracted, removed from the mines. The metal is sometimes almost entirely free from the foreign matter, yielding when metal down in the furnace in 90 to 95% of copper. Wow, so shit pure. Shit so pure it just slide up out the ground, but I guess you gotta shake the shit loose. Uh, it's been down there so long near the forks of the Autogon in 1761 by Alexander Henry. But under the peculiar circumstances, there proved entirely abortive. In 1841, Dr. Douglas Houghton made a report to the legislature of Michigan in which the earliest uh, definite information in regards to the occurrence of native copper in Lake Superior, which gave the public shortly after these mining operations were commenced in the region. Explorers of the speculators flocked to it from the quarters. In 1845, the shores of Kennewaw Point were whitened with their tents. In 1846, the excitement reached its climax after the reaction took place, and finally, only a half dozen companies out of all of that had been formed continued the operation of mining in good carness. So I guess it's shit such hard work to get the rocks and shit up out the ground that you end up not making no money. And like I told you, it get too cold to be out there just chilling. You ain't gonna be out there just kicking it. You can go home. You like, man, y'all go ahead and do this yourself. It's on y'all. There's some people built for it, man. You be meet people from up there walking around in hoodies in December. There's copper implements, and Altogon. Some laborers in employ of Mr. Greenfield were leveling the ground for brickyards on the east banks of the Autogon River, half a mile above the village, in the year 1854, when they perceived some pieces of copper, which were fashioned implements. They are said to have been found upon the bed of clay in the ravine and covered about 2 feet with alluvial earth, a large cedar tree growing nearly over the spot. They consist of two implements which may be described as spears or javelins. Heads, though more probably designed as mine tools, and two cutting instruments may properly be called chisels, as known in the annex sketches. These show the form and size better shaped to give a good fasten to a staff, and may uh, perhaps favor the idea that it was a weapon for the use of one hand, like a dirk. It must be some type of knife. Yeah, the blade is symmetrical and strong, and apparently has not been much uh, bruised or injured by use. If was to be thrown like a javelin, the stock or staff would have been fitted on around the shank. Okay, I ain't never noticed. Okay, the shank, and driven down over the blade some distance to the make of a wooden attachment properly strong to the metal part. This chisel also has not been used since neither the cutting edge nor the head is battered. It is bent upon longevity or near each end of the manner shown by the cross section in C and D. The object is giving it this form must have been to stiffen it, and thus save metal. This this contrivance speaks well to the ingenuity of the maker, and the instruments have been proportioned. The smaller ones found in Ohio, they were probably fresh from the hands of the workmen when they were lost upon the banks of the river. Although I have examined these implements, I may I am indebted to the Mercers Emerson Coburn and the Maloney from the facts of respecting them. Both are respected to be more hard and less malleable than the native copper of the mines, which it has been inferred, and they have undergone a hardening process like those found in Marquette and elsewhere. I have supposed the hardness is due to only prolonged hammering, which the density is increased in the copper of the ancient inhabitants of Europe was hardened by alloying with tin. Copper implements Kirk River not on the map in August 1854 while the workmen were go, okay, copper implements in the Kirk River not on the map in August 1854 while workmen were engaged for Mr. John Burt in the making a dam across the Carp River near Marquette. Signs of copper were discovered in gravel. There were wheeling earth from the banks of the stream and did not at first preserve them remains. They were visible in the form of spots of green carbonate, which is examination is presented a core of unoxidized metal. Mr. Burt states that there were numerous thin chips of copper not entirely decayed, which appeared to have been cut from a piece of native metal by a sharp or thin tool. There was also found a rude copper knife, the shank 2.5 inches and the blade 4.5 inches in length, making 7 inches. The blade resembles the shape of a short butcher knife, very much worn. It has spots of native silver embedded in it, and those frequently seen in Lake Superior specimens of copper, although tools resemble a boykin with a socket for the insertion of a wooden handle. There will also there were also arrow and spear heads of copper, which were probably made upon the spot. These relics were lying upon the bed of the water-washed gravel. Okay. This is the pointed tool, the socket of Carp River right here on the right, figure 15, 10. So it did have a little handle like it was supposed to be inserted in some wood. Because I just don't see nobody, unless you probably just carving up a deer. That's probably what it was for. Because if it's copper and metal, those are antibacterial metals. So I see that as being like a something you would use on meat. Which Mr. Butt conjectures once formed the bed of the river, but the channel of this time is 10 feet lower. Soil had accumulated over the tools to the depth of 2 feet, and on it were pine trees considered to be at least 100 years of age. The knife was hardly then the chip and does not bend so easily. The hardness is probably due to the process of hammering which the mass underwent while it was in a cold state and not any tempering. So they beat the motherfucker. They saying that people beat this knife while it was cold. They sharpened it while it was cold rather than heat it up and beat it like a blacksmith, which I picture would be 10 times harder to make a sharp object. But I think if you just rub it against another metal object, you can get pretty far. Yeah, yeah. As they say, diamond sharpen diamonds or something like that. Steel sharpen steel. Um, if the Boykin-like implements had not been this parcel to this might have been referred to the present race of Indians. If the Boykin-like implements had not been of this parcel, the others might have been referred to the present race of Indians. This process, knives, and other implements made of copper when the French came among them, but there were very rude. Much Bailey of Eagle Harbor had one which resembled somewhat of a similar knife used by saddlers. There is a notch on it in the middle by which to attach a handle. Mr. B thinks it was used in dressing and working skins. Me too. See, as I told you, it only makes sense. It was found in the gravel within a picket of Fort Wilkins Copper Harbor near the mouth of Carp River. There are remains of cabins placed in a row like the houses of a village. This is shown by a line of heaps of stone and clay, like the remains of chimneys, and connected with them slight ridges of clay resembling the low embankments around the large building. After the timber had decayed, this may have been formed of clay which was used to dot the chinks of the forest of ancient growth covered those ruins. Although I know of the historical evidence illustrating the point, I should hesitate to give them a greater antiquity than the early French adventurers. It about 200 years since the Jesuits established themselves in Lake Superior. Traders must have preceded them 30 years and constructed cabins at the place not mentioned by the Jesuits. I have seen the ruins of the buildings on the west fork of the Ontogon near the old Copper Rock, the history of which has reached us, and which were erected in 1769 and 1845, 84 years afterwards. All the logs, except such as were of cedars, had disappeared near the cabins which were used for a blacksmithing shop. The outlines of a forge, which quite distinct with cinders, charcoal, and pieces of rusty iron lying upon it. There are also several pounds of corroded steel and brass, mostly the locks and guards of muskets and copper instruments. Okay, in section. So one gun barrel and a forged piece of tree pine established itself, which we cut down and counted upon the stump 61 layers of annual growth, and regarded to the implements found in the mill of Carp River. I incline to the belief that they are not as ancient as old mines. Mr. Henry, who has furnished us the account of the explorations just referred to the Algonquin rivers on the north shore, made the English soon as the Treaty of Paris says that the Indians beat out pieces of copper into bracelets and spoons. None of the implements are shown to have been so difficult to form as the chisel and a spearhead, which are found in the old pits. These required the state of mechanical skill apparently above the reach of Indians. Mr. Burt has furnished the following sketches of copper hook, which found by himself in a extraction of the St. Mary's Canal. Is unusual flaw which cold wrought articles exhibit and doubtless belong to the class of recently made implements. On Canada's shores of the St. Mary's River and the Grand River, 12 miles below, the salt of implements are discovered the soil of half by a half-breed and presented to Mr. Burt. A horizontal side view sufficiently shown in the sketch indicates its use in which it was cutting instrument like a chisel. It was buried head. It, its bruised head shows the effect of blows from a mallet or a wood stone. A rude knife or a spearhead of copper were recently picked up by Mr. William Winross of Oak Orchard, on Conto County, Wisconsin, of the western shores of Green Bay. They are in a possession of Lyman C. Draper, Esquire, of Madison, Wisconsin, to whom they were presented by Hans C. D. Robinson of Green Bay. The spears and arrowheads differ from those of Lake Superior principally in the state of finish and in having a hole in the shank to fasten a handle or shaft. Both of these specimens are roughly forged and apparently ground to a burnt edge. They are, with little doubt, recently the work of some half-breed or Frenchman, by whom were ancient mines wrought. I have already given reasons going to show that it was not the present Indian race by whom these mines were worked. As yet no remains of cities, graves, domiciles, or highways have been found in the copper region, as the race appears to have been farther advanced in civilization than their successors, whom we call the Aborigines. These probably had better means of transportation than a bark canoe. They might thus carry provisions in greater distance of water. The mine works are open cuts exposed to the day, which in the winters of the county, where snow lies for 3 to 5 feet in depth, could not be occupied comfortably without shelter. No remains of such coverings have been discovered, nor is it probable that any traces of such should not be recoverable. An upland thermometer describes to minus 38. Now you get what I'm saying? Like, it's not worth it, bro. Like, you can come up there for the summer and do some little mining, do your little thing, but to keep it a buck, you gonna get the fuck out of there when the snow start falling, or before that lake freeze, because it's a cold walk down there to Ohio, and then to get to Ohio and it's still fucking cold, and then you got to get all the way through 400, 500 miles of Ohio, mm, just to get your ass to fuck into Kentucky or Virginia where it's somewhat comfortable, but it's still getting cold and the soil is hard. And you got so you basically gonna be riding in Mississippi, and everybody know when you get to Ohio and that Indiana part, the drop off of the falls is crazy. You gonna drop off and land in some shit. But let's keep it moving. But as you can see, my boy has an idea that there's some more ancient race that's been floating around these Americas. And it ain't these present people, because they don't know anything about this history. This ain't to take nothing from nobody. Once again, this is not to take away the Native American card. I understand what it is to be pre-Columbian. Of course, you are pre-Columbian. But are you the first inhabitants? Are you the indigenous? No. I'm just going to keep it 1,000. I'm going to just leave it right there on the table. No. You know what I'm saying? Have we been sharing this land for a long time? Have we been friends, family, enemies, all of that a long time? Yes. This is why today there's still black on brown violence. Why we don't know why there's this deep seated problem. Then on top of that, you know, being each one of us from the family decide to take in our own straggler, our own little homeless person, and make them part of our family. Yeah, y'all didn't decide to take in these Sephardic African Jews where you were from, but we did, you know what I mean? But y'all decided to take in those French, y'all decided to take in those English, y'all decided to take in all these other people, and just because you got on the side of the winner, you think you're gonna delegate to everybody else who's Indian enough. But that's okay, because like I said, anybody that knows 1866 treaty, like we went over, it is it is your right to have your own. Now, are you supposed to go out there and just build a tribe on complete dumb fuckery and lies and no genealogy? Hell no. But if everybody in your tribe has genealogy coming from the same area, has the same story, then that is your tribe. That is your people. Get together, come together, make something. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the Muskogee Freemen. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing y'all have done. It's inspirational. But let's keep it moving. I have already given okay, we did that. Boom. Bark canoes. This might be carrying provisions for a great distance by water. Their mine workers are open cuts. Okay, it was minus 38. Yeah, that's where we're at. This would not render these trenches absolutely untenable, but there would be present great difficulties in working them. Even in modern shafts, all galleries are that are closed by self-shutting doors. Frost penetrates to a depth of 20 and 30 fathoms. It is frequently necessary to put stoves in the upper levels in order to prevent their being filled with ice, and others therefore be barely possible, by no means profitable to work in open trenches during winter. The mines cannot readily bring with them in the spring supplies for 3 months, and often were exhausted. The same crafts might return additional supplies after spending months of summer. The miners could return to their homes for winter, carrying with them minerals obtained during the season. I told you, this is a seasonal job, bro. It's a seasonal fucking job. There's no way you did that shit all year and decided to live there just because you found copper. Only some greedy, parasitical motherfuckers want to live at the mine and mine all year long because the earth means nothing to them but a profit. Fuck who coming afterwards. Fuck who gotta live here. As long as my family doing okay. But your family gotta live here too. But it's okay. We gonna get, you know what I'm saying? We gonna get these motherfuckers up out of here one of these days. And we all gonna figure it out. Dark skin, dark brown, light brown together. And figure this shit the fuck out one of these days. Return for additional supplies. After spending the months of summer, the miners could return to their, in relations to their dead. It may have been a custom to perhaps a part of their religion to restore the bodies to their friends. If the numbers of the operators was not great, then the mortality was not greater than it is now, which would have not been a great burden in case there were no women and children. The proportional numbers of deaths would be less than at present. If it is now a season of navigation, not far from 5 in 1,000, including females and children, including all those killed by accident. All ancient excavation hitherto examined could have been made with our means of working at less expense than been incurred during the last 10 years, but most allowed much of the imperfect modes of operation, and thus increasing the number of men required to do the same works. We must also, on the other hand, conclude that the old mines were wrought a great length of time, infer that the less mining force was kept up than we have in our times in prosecutions of the mining in the remote regions. Not only would the deaths be few, but among them such distinguished persons as were entitled to sepulchral mounds and monuments would not be found in great number. The absence of artificial mounds therefore need not excite surprise. The mound builders consume large quantities of copper. Axes, adze, chisels, and ornaments, rings, and other are so common among the relics in Ohio as to leave no doubt on the subject. We know of copper-bearing veins so accessible as those of Lake Superior to a people residing on the waters of Ohio. Neither are there any other now known to produce native metals in quantities to serve as a article of commerce. Specimens of pure copper are found other mines of North America, but not a predominant part of loads and implements and ornaments found in the mounds are made of metal that has not been melted. There have been brought into shape and wrought uh, at least without heat enough to liquefy the metal, and the native silver are frequently seen uh, studying the surface of copper united or welded marks at Lake Superior specimens, whatever is found. It also proves conclusively that such pieces have not undergone fusion, for the pure white spots on the tagging of the mounds by Dr. Locke in Cincinnati possessed a flattened piece of copper weighing several pounds, which was found in the earthworks at Clarion, Hamilton County, Ohio. So Hamilton County is in Columbus, having a spot of silver as large as a pea forming a part of a mass. At the first view of the logs which supported a mass in Minnesota's veins and the marks of the tools by which they were cut brought to mind the copper axes I have seen in Ohio figures by Mr. Squire. The cut was about an inch or 3/10 wide, not smooth like that of a perfectly sharp edge, and not deep enough for the modern axe or hatchet. No such axes have been found on Lake Superior. Those of Ohio have been used as chisels, although Mr. Squire thinks the handle was attached to them, and the difference between the axe and the chisel is principally a taper of the axe towards the head. No groove of eye has been noticed in which to insert the handle, but the Peruvians had means of fastening a handle of similar instruments without either. There are also chisels like tools from the Ohio mounds, almost identical with those I had already. Figures of J. McBride, Esquire of Hamilton, Butler County, Ohio, has been possessions for the found in 1855 near that place that may be regarded either the chisel or axe or adze. How much of the time passed since the mines were wrought or since they were abandoned in question of the great interest of timber found in some of the ancient mines is better state preservation than the Ohio mounds, but it does not follow that the more recent most of the pieces exhumed were covered by water or wet earth. In the northern climates, the decay of wood is slower than in the warmer regions, and the timber itself mostly resinous, which assists to the preservation. The wooden cobwork that remains in Ohio is tumuli hitherto examined, although lies above the water, and lonely earthwork is which is buried does not wholly exclude the atmosphere.